Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and we just got the Q1 sales figures for every single new car manufacturer. And we're going to dive into these Q1 sales figures to see which manufacturers are currently succeeding in today's market and which manufacturers are struggling. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you can save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. Before we dive into all the numbers, I need to mention that these are the Q1 sales for 2023 with different automakers. Now, I will be giving a percent increase with these sales. This percent increase is based off of what these automakers sold in Q1 of 2022. So we're seeing the year-over-year gains. Now, the fact that needs to be mentioned is that Q1 of 2022 was a really bad time for automakers. Like, production was pretty much at an all-time low. And so all I'm going to say is if an automaker is not positive from Q1 of 2022 to Q1 of 2023, that's pretty dang bad because, again, Q1 of 2022 is like the all-time low for auto manufacturers. And it also needs to be mentioned that pretty much everyone is still down when you compare their sales volume levels today compared to what they were selling prior to the pandemic. With all of that out of the way, let's dive into the numbers. Now, I'm not going to go into each individual brand. I'm going to go into the brands that I think stand out in a positive way and then also in a negative way. If you want to go into individual brands, then you can just look up these numbers. It comes from goodcarbadcar.net. They basically just track these sales figures with different manufacturers, and their website actually updates pretty much on a daily basis is what it looks like. And so the first brand that stands out in a positive way is Audi. So their sales increase year over year is almost 50%. Last year, at this same time, they had sold about 35,000 cars, whereas this year they're over 52,000 vehicles sold. And so that's a huge success story. And a big part of why Audi's been so successful is because they're actually able to build cars right now. Last year, they were struggling to build cars. Now, the first not success story is what we'll call it is Alfa Romeo. They are down by almost 30%. So at the same time last year, they had sold over 3,200 units. This time, they've only sold about 2,300 units. And so they're already a low volume manufacturer and they're seeing pretty big declines. And so again, that's not a good sign for Alfa Romeo. Now, the next success story that I find absolutely fascinating is Buick. Their sales are up by almost 100%. The same time last year, they sold just under 20,000 units. They're almost at 40,000 sales for the year. Now, a big part of why this is happening with Buick, at least from what I have seen with the research I've done, is that GM pretty much cut production like massively with Buick in 2022 and 2021 and basically focused all their resources towards building GMCs and Chevys and Cadillacs because, well, the profit margins in those vehicles are higher and, well, they're easier to sell than Buicks. And now they're obviously able to allocate more resources towards Buick. And so I think the big part of the reason why the sales have increased so much year over year is because, well, Buicks are actually getting built now. So I think that's a big thing there. Now, the next not so good one is going to be Fiat, and this one I feel like is not super interesting. They basically don't even really sell cars here in the US anymore. I mean, last year they sold 340 cars in Q1. This year they've sold 138. Fiat's basically on their way out. Like, this will no longer be a brand in the US within the next year or so, roughly. So at this point in the video, you've probably noticed a trend that, well, a lot of the brands under the Stellantis umbrella are down in sales, and we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. But there is one brand that's under the Stellantis umbrella that is not down in sales, and that is Dodge. They're up by almost 25%. Last year, 41,000 units in Q1. This year, they're almost at 51,000 units already. And I would say that a big part of why this is happening is because of all of the last call models with the Chargers and the Challengers. They're getting rid of the Chargers and Challengers, and so people are flocking to buy these cars before they are no longer available. And so I think that's a big part of why sales have been boosted so much with Dodge. Now, the next success story is going to be Infiniti, believe it or not. Their sales are up by almost 40%. Last year, they're at 11,000 units. This year, they're at just under 16,000. 33,000 units. And, you know, Infiniti is an interesting story because this is a brand that everyone thought was going to disappear from the US market because they were struggling to sell vehicles, especially compared to their other Japanese counterparts like Lexus and Acura. But it seems like Infiniti is kind of making a comeback. And again, these sales figures definitely support that. And I mean, if you compare their volume to, you know, Lexus, for example, or not Lexus, sorry, Acura, for example, Acura right now is at 33,000 units. And so Infiniti isn't on the same like volume scale as Acura, but you know, they're definitely making some meaningful gains. And if you're wondering on the Lexus side of things, they're at about 68,000 units. So Lexus has had a very marginal increase year over year, whereas Infiniti's had a very large increase year over year. Now, I want to highlight 3 brands that are under the same umbrella. That is Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis. Now, the comment section down below will make you think that these are the worst cars on the planet, but whatever you think about them doesn't matter because they are selling amazingly well. All 3 of those brands are up by large margins, but I think the really fascinating thing is to look at the volume that these brands are selling compared to the competition. So Genesis right now is at over 13,000 units. So like they're getting to the point where they're going to pass Infiniti, for example, as a luxury brand. I know some people will be like, that's not all that impressive, but again, you got to remember Genesis is a very new brand. So for them to pass another more established luxury brand in terms of volume, I think that's quite impressive. Now, Hyundai is at over 184,000 units in terms of their sales so far. And I mean, I think that's just crazy because if you look at Toyota, right now they're at 390,000 units, which is way more than Hyundai. But if we go over to Kia's sales, right, Kia's, again, same manufacturer, they're at 184,000 units as well. And so you combine those 2 figures together and well, that's closing in on Toyota's volume. And so the Hyundai group with their non-luxury brands is basically gearing up to potentially pass Toyota in terms of overall volume, which I think is absolutely crazy. And, you know, another brand that you might throw under this is Honda. They're at 251,000 units. And so there are more Hyundais and Kias on the road, new ones, right, on the road right now, than there are new Hondas. And well, speaking of Toyota, they are down by a pretty large margin, about 10%. Last year, they were at over 437,000 units. This year, they're at 390,000 units. Now, the biggest reason why Toyota's volume has declined is just frankly because of availability. They just haven't been able to build vehicles at the rate that they need to build them out. If you go to pretty much any Toyota dealership, you're not going to find like any new cars. Most Toyota dealers are completely sold out. So if Toyota built more cars, they would sell more cars. And so that's kind of their whole issue. But a brand that is not struggling to build cars but is struggling to sell them is Mitsubishi. They are down by over 20%. Last year, they're at 26,000 units. This year, they're at 20,000 units. And, you know, I think Mitsubishi might need its own dedicated video, but yeah, that's a brand that's, you know, it might be going the way of what we thought was happening to Infiniti. It might be going the Fiat way is what we will call it, but I think it's a little bit too soon to call that. Now, the next brand that's down by a pretty large margin is Jeep. They're down by over 20%. Now, I just posted a video on the main channel discussing this, so I'm not really going to dive too deep into the whole situation in today's video, but all you need to know for today's video is Jeep is down. And so that marks another Stellantis brand that is down in overall volume. And well, if we talk about another Stellantis brand that's down in volume, it's Ram. They're down by almost 7%. I just made a video on the main channel rather for the Ram situation. I haven't posted it as of me filming this video, but it'll probably be posted by the time this video posts. If it's not for some reason, then we'll go subscribe to the main channel, and then as soon as it posts, you will see it. And I quickly want to talk about this whole Stellantis brand situation because almost every single one of the manufacturers that is currently down in volume is run by Stellantis. Again, the only exceptions are Dodge, right? Dodge is currently up, and then Chrysler is also currently up. Dodge is up by almost 25%, and then Chrysler is up by almost 10%. Now, I think a big part of the reason why Chrysler is up is because of minivan sales being so popular. Like, minivan supply is still pretty constrained. Like, you can't get a Toyota Sienna, you can't get a Honda Odyssey, and so a lot of people are going and buying the Pacifica because they can't get those two vans. Same with the Kia Carnival. That's also really hard to get, and so I think that's definitely boosting up the sales because there's a lot of people that want minivans, and there's not a lot of minivans available on the market. And so outside of a car being discontinued and a manufacturer making a car that is super hot, i.e. minivans, the Stellantis brands are just not selling very well. And I would say a big part of why they're not selling very well right now is because of how the cars are packaged and how much they cost with that packaging. And that's kind of what I dive into in the videos. But I mean, again, when every single manufacturer, not every single manufacturer, but most manufacturers are currently up in terms of sales and a certain manufacturer is down in terms of sales, I feel like that is kind of a sign that like the manufacturer should probably change what they're doing at that point, right? Because it's like, if everyone's down, then it's like, okay, it's the market. But if everyone's up and you're down, it's like, okay, time to go and look in the mirror, right? So capping things off for today's video, volume is improving for most automakers. There are a few automakers that are currently seeing declines in volume. And so it'll be interesting to see what the year over year changes are in quarter two, because I think quarter two is going to be quite a bit more exciting than quarter one, because quarter two of 2022 saw an increase in manufacturing with new cars. And so I think that it'll be harder for automakers to beat the, you know, volume amounts that were sold in quarter two of 2022. But regardless, this shows that, well, the auto industry is starting to recover, but you have to understand that we are still nowhere near where the auto industry was prior to the pandemic, where the auto industry was seeing, you know, 17 million plus new vehicles sold on the retail side of things. This year is going to see maybe 14 million vehicles. So like, we've got that 3 million vehicle gap that we still have to fill. And so time will tell if that ever happens. Let me know what you guys think about these sales figures. And with that being said, I'll see you.